بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، باب التوبة. قال العلماء: التوبة واجبة من كل ذنب. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك، وصل على المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. اللهم صل على محمد كلما ذكره الذاكرون، وصل على محمد كلما غفل عن ذكر الغافلون. ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. Alhamdulillah, we were covering the few reasons why a person stays away from Tawbah, those things which prevents a person from doing Tawbah. One of them is that the feeling of ecstasy and feeling of that moment of committing the sin. Generally, when we have something to eat, sometimes we realize that this thing tastes even better. Then we find out afterwards that this actually was haram. So one of these things. So when a person is committing a sin, he gets this buzz, this temporary person is on high. But then afterwards, obviously, he wears off and then he has to face the consequences afterwards. Number two, excuses of taqdeer. A person says that it's written, it's going to happen anyway, so why should I try to stay away from this? Number three, when a person, he has the quality of Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, Al-Ghaffar, Al-Ghafur, Al-Ghafir in front of him, and he thinks to himself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all merciful, very merciful, and he's all forgiving anyway. So, he's going to forgive my sins. So let me just continue indulging myself and continue living a life of sins. Number four, a person thinks that I'm doing Tawbah now, I'm going to do the sin again anyway. I'm going to do the Tawbah now, I'm going to do the sin again later on. So this thought of doing the sin again, it prevents the person from doing the sin. Number five, then a person thinks that, when I'm doing, at the moment, a sin and I'm young, let me grow up older, when I hit the age of 50, 60, when I've got, white hair, when I'm more closer to my death, then I will do the Tawbah. So this thought of being young and doing the Tawbah later on prevents a person also. Like this. Number six, the person is not even aware of the sin. At times it happens that a person has not given enough time to study, enough time to realize that this is a sin. So the person does not even know that's a sin. So if a person does not even know that is a sin, he will not be able to do Tawbah from this. Sometimes when we're about to do something, there's something in our heart that is trying to stop us from that action. So that thought of stopping yourself from that action is actually a good sign. That means that there's an angel, there's a farishta, which is preventing you from doing that action. So even if you're not aware, this is an action, but that thought that, the moment of feeling guilty, or the moment of thinking again of doing that action, then that itself is a sign that there could be a sin. So a person, if he has this thought inside himself, then he should just stop there and obviously move away from that place and move away from there, so then he doesn't continue that action. Number seven thing that prevents a person from doing Tawbah is that he thinks that if I do Tawbah, Allah is going to forgive my sin anyway, so I do Tawbah again. If I've already been forgiven once, why do Tawbah again? So he doesn't exactly turn his direction, he doesn't change his life, he doesn't change his habits, so he continues in that habit. Whereas Tawbah means to change yourself, to do a U-turn, to completely bring transformation in your life, that your person who was living a life of disobedience, now he's changing himself and becoming an obedient servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And another thing that prevents a person from doing tawbah, he thinks to himself, and the shaitan whispers into his mind that you've done too many sins. You've done too many sins, so why do tawbah? A person has lived his life of sins and constantly he's sinning away. Now the shaitan puts his thought into his mind that, you've done too many sins, you're not going to be forgiven. There's no way you're going to be forgiven. And we all know, he'll come into the story later on about the person who killed and murdered 99 people. And he also killed the 100th one as well. So now the shaitan puts us whisper in your mind that, you've done too many sins. Allah's not going to forgive you. You've done sins that you can't even speak about it to others. That's how humiliating those sins are. How is Allah going to forgive you? So this thought comes to a person's mind, then he doesn't, go towards the tawbah. Whereas if you look at the Quran Sharif, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says in the Quran as well, وَرَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. And although in hadith as well we hear that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has said that my mercy prevails over my wrath and my anger. Meaning my mercy is greater than the anger. My mercy is even more greater than anger. So it doesn't matter how many sins a person has, my mercy is greater than that as well. We hear the virtue of awabin, mentioned with the children earlier on. One of the virtues of awabin mentioned, which is 6 rakat after Maghrib Salah, that if a person has the sins equal to the foam on the sea. Just to explain what the foam on the sea meant was that, when a child has a bubble bath, the amount of bubbles that in that small bathtub that we have, the person not able to count those bubbles in that bath. Imagine the sea, which is full of foam on top of it. There's a whole bubbles on top of it. And that amount of sins a person had, even then, if a person was to shed one tear in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely, he'll wipe away all of those sins. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy is greater than it. He has enveloped everything. So if a person was to understand and realize that my sins are nothing compared to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then a person will be able to do tawbah, a person will be able to bring changes in his life, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him. And as you mentioned about sins, that we shouldn't think that it's a small sin, a minor sin, or is nothing harmful. Doesn't matter, let me just carry on. There's a great scholar by the name of Allama Alusi Baghdadi rahmatullahi alayhi. He says that خلي الذنوب كبيرها وصغيرها ذاك التقى. خلي الذنوب صغيرها وكبيرها ذاك التقى. That all person abstain from all sins, major and minor sins. Why? Because this is taqwa. Abstain from all sins, major and minor, because this is taqwa. وَاصْنَعْ كَمَاشٍ فَوْقَ أَرْضِ الشَّوْكِ يَحْذَرُ مَا يَرَى. And you behave like a person walking on a thorny path. A person walking on a thorny path. Behave like him. Why? Because when a person walking on a thorny path, he'll make sure that he's safe from all the thorns there. He'll keep himself safe from the thorns that's there. So walk like in this world as though you are walking on the path of thorns. That keep yourself safe. لا تحقرن صغيرة إن الجبال من الحصى. Do not underestimate, do not belittle a minor sin. Why? Because the mountains are formed from accumulating of small pebbles. When you have one pebble, 2, 3, 10, 20, 100, 200, 300, slowly those pebbles will grow into a bigger rock and will slowly go into a mountain. So then small pebbles will create a mountain. Like this, your small sins, small sins, if a person continues doing 1, 2, 10, 100, 200, then it will build into a big sin as well and major sin as well. That's why it's important that we don't belittle any small sin. And at the same time, we don't think that it's only a small deed. Walking on the street and we see a wrapper on the floor, we see some litter on the floor, person should also think that, okay, this is also, even though it's a small action, that even that small action is also could be a means of salvation for us in the hereafter. Now moving on to the next subject of this Babu Tawbah is the signs of acceptance of Tawbah. So in the beginning we mentioned the definition of Tawbah, we went over the virtues and the benefits of Tawbah, and then we mentioned over those things which prevents a Tawbah. And the next thing that we're going to discuss today, inshallah, is the signs of acceptance of Tawbah. How do we know, or what are the signs of our Tawbah being accepted? In one of them, the sign is that the hatred for that sin enters into the person's heart. the thought of doing that sin just leaves a person's mind. He doesn't even think of that sin anymore. He feels irritated to committing that sin. There's a hesitation towards it. He doesn't want to do that sin again. His attitude changes. He's becoming a better person. His character changes. He's becoming more closer and closer to the masjid. He's coming more closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has good manners. He has better manners. Even his speech is better than before. And also, he is more inclined towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the image of the sin leaves a person's mind. He doesn't think of the sin. Now, as a human being, I mentioned that كُلُّ بَنِي آدَمْ خَطَّاءُونَ, that every person will make a mistake somewhere. So even though the shaitan comes and puts that thought, immediately he fights that thought off. Immediately he is able to control himself. Immediately he is able to move himself away from that sin that he was involved in. So if a person is able to do that, if a person is able to disconnect himself from that sin that he was involved in, then that's a sign of the acceptance of the tawbah. That's a sign of the acceptance of tawbah. Abu Layth al-Samarqadi rahmatullahi alayhi, in his kitab Tanbih al-Ghafilin, in one place he mentions that some scholars were asked the signs of tawbah. So they mentioned 4 signs. Number 1, that if he is able to control his tongue from lying, he's able to control his tongue from ghibat, he's able to control his tongue from useless words. So if a person is able to do that, that he's able to control his tongue. Whatever he utters is for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is good. It's not evil. It's not bad. It's not lie. It's not deceiving. It's not you're futile. Then that's one sign. Number 2, when there is no more jealousy inside his heart, no enmity inside his heart. He's not jealous of anybody. He doesn't have any enmity. He regards everybody else better than him. He regards everybody else, even more pious than him. So then if a person has no more jealousy, a person has no enmity for anybody else, then this is a second sign. Number 3, when he distances himself from bad company, he moves away from bad area, he moves away from bad people, he moves away from bad company. When he is able to distance himself from that bad company, bad friends, bad colleagues, and etc., then that's a sign, and he moves himself towards good company, good friends, good area, good place, good location, house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc., then that's another sign of acceptance of tawbah. And number 4, when he is always prepared to face death. He's ready to face death. If the talk of death is mentioned in front of him, he doesn't fear death. He's ready for Malakul Maut to come to him. He's ready for death. Anytime Malakul Maut comes, he's ready for that time. He's ready. He's looking forward for Malakul Maut. He's looking forward to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for this, he's constantly doing istighfar. His tongue is constantly busy in doing istighfar and seeking forgiveness from the previous life of sinful life and disobedience, and he's constantly doing tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's ready that when is the death of Malakul Maut going to come, when is my soul going to leave my body, so that I can meet my Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these were the 4 points mentioned, 4 signs mentioned in one part of Tanbih al-Ghafilin. And in another part, same kitab, some hukama and some wise men were asked same question, that if a person does tawbah, how does he know that my tawbah is accepted? And they also gave 4 answers. Number 1, severing ties with bad friends and making friends with pious and righteous people. Meaning those bad friends or bad companies or bad items that he was connected with. Nowadays, if you move into technology world, then these websites or these softwares or these apps or these investments or whatever was having an effect on him and harm and negative impact on him, he disconnects him from those. He uninstalls those items, apps or softwares. He moves away from those gadgets which were taking him towards the sin. Then he's connecting himself towards a better app, a better place, a better person, even a gadget. It doesn't necessarily mean that a person has to have a smartphone. Even a normal brick phone that we have does the job that what we need for as a phone to connect yourself to another person. Even a normal non-smartphone also does the job. But if a person, this smartphone is leading him towards the sin, and he disconnects himself from that, and he deletes the app, or has some sort of restrictions on the internet that doesn't take him towards the sin. Number 2, stop any type of sin and he's busy in ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So any type of sin, we mentioned a few names last week. So any of those sins and other sins, he struggles and stops himself from the sin, and he uses that energy in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 3, the love of this world and the matters of this world disappear from the person. This luxury life and this temporary glitter, all, just deceiving the person. Then he reminds himself of the hereafter instead. He reminds himself of the trials and the tribulations of the hereafter, the difficulties of the hereafter, and also the Jannat and Jahannam of the hereafter. So he's more focused towards the Akhirat. Yes, he's living in this world just like the boat which is sailing on the sea. He's just there. The love of the world hasn't sunk into his heart, or the water has not sunk into the boat. If he does that, the boat will collapse and drown, and the people will also face death. So the love of this world has not been entered into his heart that deep, that engrossed into his heart, that makes him neglectful of the Akhirat. Rather, he's in control of the world, of the love of this world. And as the ulama explained, that one heart cannot have true love. One heart cannot have true love. You can't have the love of the world and love of the hereafter in one heart. Or you cannot have the love of the Allah and the love of other than Allah in one heart. It's either Allah or non-Allah, either world or hereafter. So one of them will be in the person's heart. Number 4, the firm resolution and in this belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He's the sustainer. He's the one who sustains us. The person has this inside his mind, that my Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sustaining me. So if my Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sustaining me, he is more busy in carrying out the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rather than breaking them. So if for example, times of comes for salah, he'll make his way to perform the salah. He'll make his way to perform the salah on time rather than, disregarding the salah, neglecting the salah. So these were the 4 signs mentioned, and total we've had about 9 signs mentioned of the acceptance of tawbah. Number 1, the image of the sin is removed from the person's mind. Then we mentioned other 4, that a person is able to control his tongue. A person is able to, remove jealousy, hatred from his heart, enmity from his heart. Number 4, a person is able to distance himself from bad company and make himself closer to the good company. Number 5, we mentioned that if he is ready to face death, anytime he's ready for the Malakul Maut to come. Number 6, he breaks his relationship with the bad friends and makes a friendship with the good and pious people, which is similar to the number 4 that was mentioned above. Next one is that a person is able to stay away from the sin, then he does a struggle and he does the effort of restraining from sins and performing the acts of worship. Then we mentioned that the matters and the love of this world is removed from the heart, and the love of the hereafter and the Jannah is more into his heart. And the last sign we mentioned, that a person has this in mind, that my Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a sustainer. He is sustaining me, He's providing for me. So rather than running after the world, he busies himself in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, following the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yes, he continues to earn, he continues to live in this world using the asbab and the means available in the permissible, in the halal way. These were the few signs of the acceptance of tawbah. Inshallah, we mention about how to do tawbah, the practical method of maintaining tawbah, and then also as Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi has mentioned, the conditions of tawbah. So we mentioned these few topics and few subjects, inshallah, in our next lesson. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the correct understanding. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us one of those who are sincere in their tawbah and who are one of those who change their life completely and do a complete U-turn in their life. Allahumma ameen. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد وبارك وسلم سبحان الله بحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك سبحان ربك رب العزه ما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين. Inshallah next